In the late 1980s, the airwaves felt electric. The bassline dropped, a powerful, driving beat that channeled the spirit of hip-hop and dance, forcing the world onto the dance floor. Say what you want about them, but at one point in time, the whole world was rocking to Milli Vanilli. For a fleeting 2 years, the duo of Rob Pilatus and Fab Morvan were the global standard for cool. They sold 33 million singles, moved 14 million albums, and collected awards that every artist dreams of, including 3 American Music Awards and a Grammy. They were an image of perfection, of international glamour. But beneath the shining facade of success was a silence. A deep, consequential silence that was louder than any blast. Their dream was built on a calculated deception, a secret so big it would lead to a public execution and 27 class action lawsuits. This is not just the story of the biggest music scandal of its time, it is the tragedy of Rob Pilatus, a lonely soul who gained the world but lost his voice, and ultimately, himself. What happens when you are stripped of your identity, your career, and the very voice you built your life upon? The story of how Milli Vanilli dominated the charts is cold, hard business. The story of Rob Pilatus, however, is rooted in the ache of searching for where you belong. Born in New York on June 8, 1965, Rob was immediately disconnected from his roots. He never met his biological father, a military man, and his mother was a white German stripper dancer. The instability of his early life meant he spent his first 4 years in an orphanage. When a white engineer and his wife in Munich, Germany, adopted him, the geography changed, but the deep sense of isolation remained. Growing up black in Munich during the 1970s and 80s was a constant struggle. Rob Pilatus found himself in an overwhelmingly white environment, often feeling like an outsider. In interviews, he recalled the cruelty of being called Kunta Kinte, a painful reference to the TV miniseries Roots, by the other children, and he was frequently picked on and beaten up for being the only black kid in school. His adopted father, perhaps trying to overcompensate or conform, was strict, forbidding Rob from watching American shows and movies like Lassie or Tarzan or any form of American comedy. Rob felt his parents simply couldn't understand him or the cultural chasm he was navigating. This loneliness drove him to escape. By his teens, Rob ran away from his adoptive home, drawn toward the energy of the burgeoning black culture that was finally crossing the Atlantic. The rise of figures like Michael Jackson and Prince made black identity cool, a powerful antidote to years of alienation. Rob immersed himself completely, finding his confidence and community in hip-hop, breakdancing, and working as a model and DJ. It was in a Munich club that Rob met the other half of what would become the sensation, Fab Morvan. Fab, originally from Paris, had also sought better opportunities in Germany. They were 2 black men drawn together by circumstance and a shared love for the same music and dance culture. Despite their contrasting personalities, Fab was relaxed, quiet, and preserved, while Rob was the charismatic, wild, outspoken, and loud force. They saw a potential in their shared dream to sing and break into the entertainment business. They attempted to form their own group, Empire Bazaar, and Rob played guitar in another called Wind, but neither went anywhere. Their break came when they were introduced to Frank Farian, a man whose resume was staggering. Over 850 million records sold and 800 gold and platinum certifications. Farian was already famous for his 1970s disco group, Boney M, where he famously used hired models to front the group while he himself performed all the vocals, a critical detail they should have heeded. Farian saw Rob and Fab and knew they were the perfect look, athletic, young, black, and models. Frank Farian signed them to a 3-album production deal. Rob and Fab, completely broke and living in the projects, were blinded by the promise of fame. They took the advance, a mere $1,500 each, and used it for clothes and those signature extension braids. The producer named their new project Milli Vanilli, after his girlfriend Millie. The stage was set, and the two young men, desperate to escape poverty and find acceptance, were about to step into a gilded cage. They were finally going to be seen. But Frank Farian had decided, long ago, that they would never be heard. The arrangement forged with Frank Farian was the key that unlocked the world for Rob and Fab, but it came with an immediate and terrible cost: silence. Farian, the veteran producer infamous for using models to front his 70s disco group Boney M, had a formula. He had recorded the album with studio musicians, vocalists Brad Howe, Charles Shaw, and 2 American twin female singers. When he presented the track, "Girl You Know It's True," to Rob and Fab, they were ready to sing, but the producer cut them short. Their job, he explained, was simply to look athletic, young, and black, and perform the songs. Rob and Fab initially refused. They argued vehemently with Farian, insisting they wanted to use their own voices, and they walked out of the studio. But they were broke. Farian reminded them they owed him money, around $5,000 for survival advances, and he threatened their futures in the music business. Trapped in poverty and blinded by the chance to escape, they reluctantly agreed to lip-sync, planning to simply pay Farian back and leave. The moment "Girl You Know It's True" dropped on June 27, 1988, everything changed. The song immediately took the world by storm, hitting #1 across Europe. American record mogul Clive Davis of Arista Records swiftly stepped in, repackaging the European album All or Nothing and releasing it in the US as "Girl You Know It's True." The success was unprecedented. The album spent 41 weeks in the top 10 of the Billboard charts and remained on the charts for a staggering 278 weeks overall. The singles, "Baby Don't Forget My Number," "Girl I'm Going to Miss You," and "Blame It on the Rain" all became worldwide #1 hits. The image of Milli Vanilli, Rob with his powerful stage presence and Fab with his relaxed charm, became iconic. They were the perfect embodiment of 90s crossover pop, a cultural phenomenon that sold 33 million singles and 14 million albums globally. Rob Pilatus and Fab Morvan were suddenly superstars, touring over 100 cities in 8 months. They were tasting the fame they had desperately craved, a fame that made them feel seen and accepted after a lifetime of feeling isolated. The money, the clothes, the adoration, it was the dream realized. But when it came time to record the second album, the tension, and the lie, flared up again. Rob and Fab once more demanded to sing on their own record, determined to reclaim their voices. However, Frank Farian flatly refused, revealing he had already completed the entire second album using the studio musicians. They had reached the pinnacle of pop music, achieving global superstardom, American Music Awards, and a coveted Grammy nomination. But success didn't grant them agency. They were still merely the beautiful faces of an invisible lie, setting the stage for the catastrophic fall that would define the Milli Vanilli scandal. The house of cards began to shake the moment an original voice demanded recognition. It started with Charles Shaw, one of the real rappers on the album, who publicly came forward to reveal that those were his vocals and that he hadn't been paid or credited. Farian, desperate to suppress the truth of the brewing Milli Vanilli scandal, quickly paid Charles Shaw a reported $150,000 to retract his statement. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. The skepticism grew. People began to question how a French guy and a German guy, whose spoken English was noticeably poor, could sing with such clarity on the record. The show in Living Color even exposed them, doing a sketch that mocked their heavy accents. Amidst this pressure, Rob Pilatus's arrogance seemed to mask his fear. He went to Time magazine and infamously declared he was the new Elvis Presley, and that Milli Vanilli was musically more talented than Bob Dylan or the Beatles. Then came the moment that would forever be etched in pop culture infamy. During an MTV tour performance of Girl You Know It's True, in front of 80,000 fans, the track skipped on Rob Pilatus's part. Rob ran off stage. While the crowd seemed to quickly forget the glitch, the media and reporters were there, and the slip-up was quickly publicized. Despite the mounting evidence and the public gaffe, the machine kept rolling. They won 3 American Music Awards: Favorite New Rock/Pop Artist, Favorite New Soul Artist, and Favorite R&B Single. The highest honor came next: Best New Artist at the 32nd Grammy Awards. They had achieved the dream. But this dream, achieved through the lip-sync controversy, was quickly turning into a nightmare. Rob and Fab, feeling their power, delivered an ultimatum to Frank Farian. They wanted to sing on the next album, and they wanted more money. Farian said no. The 2 young men, who felt they were big-time stars now, told him they didn't need to work with him anymore. This defiance was the spark Farian needed to ignite the final fire. On November 14, 1990, Frank Farian flew from Germany to Los Angeles and held a press conference. He brutally exposed the truth to the world, declaring that Milli Vanilli were frauds and didn't sing a lick on the album. The shockwaves were instantaneous. For days later, Rob Pilatus and Fab Morvan gave back their Grammy and confessed that none of their vocals were on the records. The backlash was unlike anything the music industry had ever seen. Fans filed at least 27 class action lawsuits in the United States, citing U.S. consumer fraud protection laws. People claimed they wanted their money back, stating they couldn't sleep at night after finding out about the lip-syncing. Arista Records eventually reached a settlement to refund concert attendees and those who purchased Milli Vanilli songs. The global sensation was now the global joke. Rob and Fab found themselves completely blackballed from the industry. Farian tried to relaunch the album with the original singers under the name, The Real Milli Vanilli, but it failed. The money, the fame, the image, all were stripped away in a single, devastating moment. The 2 men who had once sold millions now sold shame. They fell into deep depression, and both ended up in drug rehab. The aftermath of the Milli Vanilli scandal was a financial and psychological earthquake that had a distinct American flavor. In the U.S., the fan fury was channeled through the courts. At least 27 class action lawsuits were filed nationwide, invoking consumer fraud protection laws. These weren't just angry fan letters. They were legal demands for retribution against what was perceived as a massive act of corporate deception. Arista Records eventually settled, agreeing to refund money to everyone who had bought the songs and attended the concerts. The legal system, in a rare moment, had validated the outrage of the audience. For Rob and Fab, the consequences were devastating. They were now free agents from Frank Farian, but found themselves immediately and completely blackballed from the music industry. The world that had celebrated their image now mocked their reality. Fab Morvan coped by retreating, staying in his house for years and only venturing out at night to buy groceries. But the impact on Rob Pilatus was far more profound. Having already struggled with isolation and racism in Germany, the public humiliation served as a catastrophic blow to his fragile sense of self. Friends who knew him described Rob in America as just a lonely soul, attempting to understand the culture, wandering in the dark. Desperate for a chance to prove the talent dismissed by Frank Farian, they signed with a small, independent label, Taja's Records. Fab took serious singing lessons and focused on sobriety. But Rob was already spiraling, deeply immersed in drugs. The comeback attempt, meant to silence the lip-sync controversy, failed tragically. The new album sold only 2,000 copies, and the label went out of business. The shame and failure consumed Rob, driving him into a dark place that would soon lead to self-destruction. The man who had been the face of global fame was now facing criminal charges. The final chapter of Rob Pilatus's short life reads like a tragic list of consequences. By 1996, the descent was complete. Rob was sentenced to 3 months in prison and 180 days in drug rehabilitation for a string of charges, including assault, vandalism, and attempted robbery, acts fueled by his drug use and depression. His life became a public, painful cycle of shame and addiction. Long before his criminal descent, the psychological toll had become unbearable. On November 30, 1991, Rob attempted to take his own life by slashing his wrists, taking an overdose of prescription pills, and dangling himself from a hotel balcony before being rescued by police. He simply could not recover from the crushing humiliation of the Milli Vanilli scandal and the loss of everything he had achieved, however illusory that success was. In a final attempt to salvage the group, Frank Farian reached out to Rob, paying for him to attend 6 months of drug rehabilitation in Germany and even traveling to India for more treatment. Farian was trying to put the pieces back together, perhaps driven by guilt or, more likely, by the scent of missing money. But it was too late. On April 3, 1998, Rob Pilatus was found dead in a hotel room in Germany. The autopsy ruled his death an accidental overdose from alcohol and prescription drugs. He was only 33 years old. Rob's friends knew this day was coming. To them, he was always that lonely soul, a black kid raised in a hostile, segregated environment, desperate for love and acceptance. He gained global fame only to have his voice stolen and his image weaponized. The world had laughed at the lip-sync controversy, but it had silently consumed the man. Fab Morvan, the other half of Milli Vanilli, was able to slowly rebuild his life, continuing to sing and perform with the real original vocalists. But Rob, the wild and outspoken one, remained the ultimate casualty of the lie. His tragedy is a powerful reflection on the human cost of the music industry's deception and the ruthlessness of public shaming. If this story reminds you of the immense pressure fame puts on a vulnerable spirit, share your thoughts below. We read every comment. Tell us, what is the greatest injustice in the story of Milli Vanilli? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of the black legends who changed culture, even through their struggles. Until next time, we hope you find the strength to speak your truth.